For me, grief was the catalyst to start asking those much deeper questions. What is the depth of our capacity? And grief really shows us the depth of our capacity to hold. You're placed in this well of who you really are, and it strips down all of the layers that we don't typically engage with. I think that grief can swallow us whole, right? And at times it 100% swallowed me whole. And in those moments, there is no light, right? Like there's no, I think there's movement, but we can't detect it just because we're in the dark and we're confused. But in that, it forces a surrender. But I started to question who I was underneath the grief. And for me, what alleviated the thing was creativity.
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Thank you for your time and your energy that you invest into listening to this podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I am super excited for today's guest. We have Devorah Brinckerhoff. She's a mixed media artist and creator of Soul Portraits, a healing methodology that uses creativity to transform trauma into empowerment. Devorah, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I love asking all of my guests my signature question: who are you and who are you not?
I am endlessly curious. Who am I not? I'm not fixed. I feel like I'm constantly changing and open to possibility.
Love that. I love that. And it's so opposite of like what we are told when we enter in this world, our first 12 years.
Yeah.
We're taught to like pick a lane, pick an identity, stay there, be in a box.
Yeah.
So I love that. And quick question, like when did you really start to embrace flexibility in your identity or fluidity or just that adaptability? Was that early on? Was that always with you, or was that something that kind of came later?
I think it was always with me. It had to be with me in terms of but it came more from a survival instinct or that adaptability because I didn't fit. And so I think I like altered myself to fit, which turned into something that I think worked for me for a while and then worked against me. And once I realized that, I really needed to unlearn a lot of that adaptability, or to keep the adaptability to but really stay true to myself. And it very much anchored in after I had children because nothing goes as planned when you have kids.
What has been your journey with grief, and how has that played a role into your full expression and your full experience of where you are today?
Grief has played a long-standing role in my life. Again, in the first sort of 30 years, had grief, but didn't really understand what grief was or how it was running the show, mostly because I was pretty detached from my truest self. Um, when our children were experiencing very young and early childhood sexual abuse, and we were working with them to move through that process. During that time, because of the nature of sexual abuse and what it brought up, how it was threatening to my family of origin, it's my history as well, and we had been sued by our collective parents, my husband's father and stepmother, and my parents joined into that lawsuit. And I also received a letter of excommunication. And that was a huge blow. Within 24 hours, lost my siblings, my parents, my in-laws, my friends and family, like extended. Most people didn't know what was going on, but the people who knew, like, really took sides. And all of a sudden, from having a very large extended family that we did things with every weekend, we all of a sudden became a family of five with two very traumatized children. And I think too traumatized parents, like we were just shells of people for a long time. And grief has a life of its own. It really shows up in a very powerful, as a force of nature. And I would understand it in one moment and then it would shift and change its weight and fly off in a different direction. And that is where flexibility and adaptability, I would learn to flow with holding all of the sorrow while also connecting to play and connecting with the innocence and connecting with possibility and healing is all kind of wrapped into one. And I really experience grief as some very deep and dark trenches that I needed to walk through, and in doing so, really came out the other side as a totally different person, forged with a level of strength and uh, openness and compassion that I would not have ever connected with otherwise, ever, or learn like what I was capable of.
Wow. As I'm receiving this, to me, it's like that's what alchemy is.
Yeah,
That's what alchemy is. You
yeah,
said something that I want to hone in on because I don't think a lot of us are, a lot of us are used to thinking about grief and play and creativity and compassion all in the same sentence. So, how did you discover that or open yourself up to that? Because, most people we think of grief, we lost something, someone, it's heavy, I'm sad, I'm devastated, I'm angry, end of story.
right.
But as evolution is always happening, there's always a new perspective to try out and engage with.
So I I think that grief can swallow us whole, right? And at times it 100% swallowed me whole. And in those moments, there is no light, right? Like there's no, I think there's movement, but we can't detect it just because we're in the dark and we're confused and we're miserable. And the word devastated, I think, is a really good one. So within that, you can feel like there is no way out. You can feel like there isn't a step you can take that will have any alleviation for the feelings. My computer is making noises. I hope you can't hear it. My daughter is. Can you hear that? No. Okay, good. Um, so I lost my train of thought. But in that, like when you're there, it forces a surrender. At least it did for me. And I couldn't tolerate just staying down. There's some kind of survivor instinct, I think, within all of us. But I started to question who I was underneath the grief. Like, who am I? Like, how do I tolerate this kind of feeling? And for me, what alleviated the that feeling was creativity. And like there, when I had children, there's like this love that I had never experienced before, and I would do anything to protect them. And so there's a real strength in that, and there's a real joy in that. Like kids, when given the room and the space, are beautiful, right? They have a natural curiosity and a natural hopefulness. Even in the worst of circumstances, they can bounce back a lot more quickly than grown-ups do. And that really taught me to play and to embrace the kind of innocence that does exist inside of us because they were modeling that for me. And it was a very symbiotic. I needed to be strong and I needed to show them that life is more than what is harmful because I don't want to raise kids, and I don't want to be a person who loses hope or starts to feel that there's no point. And all of that is connected. So our darkest dark is indicative for me of our lightest light, and that they're tethered. And we go back and forth on the spectrum between them as we move through our days. And it's up to us to shift our own lens depending on where we are, if that makes sense. I hope I answered your question about how all of those things are connected, but I see them as being 100% not just connected, but absolutely tethered, and that they want to balance each other out. Like grief has beauty in it. Ugliness has beauty. They're together. So if we define wholeness, it includes everything. We can't just pick out beauty and leave ugly. We can't just pick out love and leave rage. It's we can't just decide, oh, I'm going to forgive this, but I'm not going to forgive that. We have to hold it all and be open to all of it. And
Mm,
creativity and play really showed me that.
that is so beautiful. And I was just connecting it to my, like, how can I relate to that? I think I have a short way of describing this. When I lost my first dog, I have a second dog now, but when I lost my first dog in 2018, before she passed away, I was just in this emotionally numb state for a couple years. For many reasons, partly because my job, partly because of the partner I was with. It doesn't really matter. So I just wasn't able to. You would think I was on like some type of medication that was numbing me out, which I wasn't. But that's just like how many guards I had over my heart.
Mhm.
And when my dog passed away, well, I made the decision to put her down because of what she had escalated within less than 30 days. Like, yeah, 30 days prior, she was fine. 30 days later, it was a devastating condition. So I decided to put her down. And I remember that night crying in the shower. And of course, I was grieving her, the love, missing her. I was shocked as well because that vet appointment was not planned. That was not planned to put her down. It was planned to get more treatment, more information, more meds, more things to support her. But somehow throughout the appointment, I just remember being guided like this is the moment, this is the best thing for her. So there was a little bit of shock that night in the shower when I was crying, but the beauty that you're talking about, it came through in that moment of devastation because I was like, oh, I could feel this deeply.
Mhm.
Like I didn't know I was capable of this. Like I thought I lost this at age 13. Here I am in my late 20s, early 30s, something like that. And then when you're saying play, I'm also trying to connect this here. I do remember because I was like my partying state before my dog passed. I was wild partying scene in Hollywood. And there was somehow that new identity that you're talking about. I don't know when, where, why, or who or how, but it's just correlated with this set of events. There was a playfulness that came through me that didn't need substances. And maybe it was because I was just more open and I was unlocked and I had been able to go deep into emotion through grieving my dog. Any thoughts on that? I know that's deep.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? So it's this what is the depth of our capacity? And grief really shows us the depth of our capacity to hold. You're placed in this well of who you really are, and it strips down all of the layers that we don't typically engage with. And so yeah, I think you've said it really well. Like it just falls away and you get a glimpse of who you really are underneath all the identity, underneath all the layers and labels and limiting beliefs, or just the more surface ways of moving through the world. Yeah, grief is very, very powerful. And I feel like when we allow ourselves to really experience grief, we somehow get introduced to beauty. We also get introduced to love, like what lives inside of us as an ember deep down that is just an endless well of love and well-being. And I think that grief shows that to us. I don't think we just get dropped into grief and devastation without anything to counterbalance it. But most of us are not willing to feel grief unless we're forced to, right? Unless something beyond our control has happened and there's no escaping it. Because I don't personally think that there's any amount of substance that can really mask the kind of grief that you experience and I experience, and however you experience that level of grief, you can, but then you're missing out on what is there.
Right, right. And I think you're probably saying this in an obvious way, but I like to spell things out for my listeners. Is it the expression that grief brings us into? Because grief is it like includes expression, and then expression can be also used for expressing joy, expressing play, expressing creativity. So is expression the bridge here, or how would you, or do you think of it something in a different way?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure that there's one answer for it. I think that, however, it's who we understand ourselves to be underneath grief, is the bridge. Like there's a new understanding of capacity that comes in when we allow ourselves to experience grief, to flow with it, not against it, but with it.
So beautiful. I love that. I love that. It's who you are underneath. That's the bridge. And even if we don't know what that is or who that is, it's like, what do? We allow it? Do we, oh, you said surrender. Is
Surrender.
surrender?
Yeah, surrender and I mean, because we resist it, right? Like people are really afraid of that grief, and I totally understand. I was terrified of what I would discover, and so I really avoided it. But because we're so afraid of what we're going to lose, right? Like what else are we going to lose of ourselves, of another? And so my own avoidance just kept me in that place of suffering.
Mm.
And and so when I lost everything I thought I needed, I was kind of forced. I mean, we always have a choice, so I don't want to use that word forced. But who do we become when we surrender into grief? And what do we discover when we have nothing else to lose? And that was really sort of the corner that I was in, is like, what do I do with this? And there's nothing to do, right? Like there's nothing to actually do. And I think our doing selves is just avoidant. Um, and so we don't really know who we are when we avoid the big feelings. And they just get bigger, right? And they're running the show. So when we avoid them, we're just continuing the suffering. And when we finally allow ourselves to feel it, then we discover like, oh my gosh, my capacity for love is so big. My understanding of what's possible just grew exponentially. And now I have this understanding of what unconditional love is. So we learn conditional love, but through the fires of grief, we understand what unconditional love is, because it begins this path of self-forgiveness. And I think that that is just a piece of our lives that we really don't engage with. That for me, grief, it was the doorway for that, the portal into self-forgiveness. And like once you forgive yourself, it's not even a question of forgiving other people and having compassion, because we all make mistakes and we all receive harm and we all cause harm. And so, what is it like to contend with all of that and really be like, okay, like we're all in this kind of cesspool together, and how do we really see one another through our hearts rather than all these definitions and rules and regulations that we learned? Everything is learned. It's all conditioning. It's all culture. So who are we without it? And for me, grief was the catalyst to start asking those much deeper questions.
So beautiful, so beautiful. So now I'm super excited to talk about portraits and what a soul portrait is. However, before we go there, because I was just recently looking at my statistics for the show or a poll or something I was looking at, I realized I have a lot of conscious parents that listen to this show with their kids in the car or their kids are around. And so, um, is there a way, whatever, I know there's no right or wrong, but what do you think is a good way to just briefly describe the concept of grief to like someone very young, like 5 or 6?
Well, I think we get in the way. I think 5 and 6 year olds and younger already know how to express grief when they don't get the toy or they don't get the treat or whatever it is that they're not understanding. That is a layer of grief. And so when children are having a temper tantrum, it's grief. They don't understand, and they're expressing this frustration, anger, confusion, rage, sadness, sorrow, all of it it's grief because they run into something that is too big for their systems to tolerate. And the best thing that we can do is allow them to move through those feelings without trying to suppress them. That's another form of grief, right? Suppression, that we grieve suppression later, right? If we've been conditioned to make ourselves smaller or shove down sadness because it makes people uncomfortable. And so, like, don't cry. I'm like, cry, right? Really, just cry. There's so much to cry about. There's so much to stomp our feet. And when my children were like dealing with their sadness and their rage, like we would go and break glass and plates and let that rage come out. And it moves this energy that gets stuck in our bodies. And so kids naturally, I believe, know how to move energy. It's the parents or the caregivers, the adults that get in the way. So I trust kids to know how to regulate. Like that temper tantrum is self-regulation. And it's really big. And not all of us, especially if we have more than one kid, like it's hard to allow that child to express their anger or emotions in a safe way where they're not destroying or harming themselves. But that's the ideal, right? Is to just let them express it without containing it.
What is a soul portrait?
So a soul portrait is a piece of art made from the materials of your life. Those become the foundation. So letters, old letters, photos, journals, it can be anything that's important and meaningful to you that helped you become you. So we have all of this lived experience, but we are not our experiences. They shape us, but we are so much bigger than our experiences. So when people engage with the materials of their life, they can reflect on all of the versions of who they have been. And when we do that, we make room for who we are now and who we're becoming. And I think of us as, beings that come into this world and having experiences. We sort of fill up with experiences and fill up with the conditioning and identity. And and like, what is that? What's the truth of your identity? And when you're holding a letter from an old partner, are you the version of you that received or wrote the letter, or are you the version of you that's holding the letter? And what is it like to really tease those two versions of you apart without minimizing or bypassing any layer or version, but to really honor who you've been so that you have room to become who you are?
That is so beautiful. And like what's typically like the transformation that happens to occur from that sometimes?
It
Just like,
really depends on what's the story, right? Like,
yeah.
what's the story of the person? So I teach people how to do it themselves. I have a course that walks people through it on their own if that's what they want. And I also do commissions where people send me their materials. But as an example, so when people are going through a divorce, right? And they've had a really messy divorce and they have custody battles and they have legal paperwork and they want to rip all of that stuff up, not as a way to say this didn't happen, quite the opposite, to say this did happen, but it's not defining me. So when we use and reflect and revisit our experiences, we take back our power to say, I get to choose who I am, how I'm meeting this experience, rather than making the experience define who I am. So to me, it's really taking the power back, no matter what your experience is. And, guilt and loss especially comes up for people who are parents of a child who committed suicide or a partner who committed suicide, somebody who has been a war veteran and been in battle and is responsible for death. And so, like, how do you move through those experiences that really tend to take over how we think about ourselves? And so I really encourage people to lean into the experiences as a way to recognize that they're bigger than what they have lived through. And then to say, like, let's write about who you are now and let's create an image over all of that material that invites a future that you're excited about. So it's really they're an experience and about remembering who you are. That's really the whole purpose.
This is a creative process. Would you consider it that?
100%. Absolutely. And I truly believe we're creative beings, that we always have been, that we always will be, that gets covered over and sort of taught out of us as we enter into the system of, like our educational system and just our culture, right? We have a way of saying, like, this is how you must behave in order to, like, live in a world and belong. So, it's all there. It's always there. It can't go away. It's whether or not we choose to engage with it.
And my thing that I love to think about is like some of us are even persuaded or taught that we're just not creative. Like, oh, that person's creative, but I'm not. But something like this, like a soul portrait, when and it's kind of allowing you to access creativity that you may not have had the opportunity to access before. So you may not be painting like Picasso, but you could express just as much creativity during a process like this. Any other thoughts on that?
100%. And everybody has an experience of creativity, we just don't think of it as creative. When you make a cup of coffee in the morning, you're entering into a creative act. When you plant a garden, when you choose your clothes, when you buy your clothes, when you vacuum your house, that's still alchemy, right? It's all creativity. When you make a meal, it's creativity in action, but we've been desensitized to it. And when you bring awareness and intention to it, your whole life changes. And anybody can do this process. Like as kindergartners or younger, collecting sticks or making our own nests, that's creativity. Creativity is absolutely everywhere, and it is an integral part of each and every one of us. We just don't have awareness around it. And my mission is to help people recognize that it's such a large part of who we actually are. Um, I was going to say something else, but I lost the thread of it. Yeah, so finger painting, coloring outside of the lines, anyone can do this process. And if you stop thinking about what's right or wrong or good or bad, it's how it makes you feel, and that is the only thing that matters. So art in general, whether it's theater or a meal or painting, it's subjective. And if you like it, it's good art. If you're creating something, you're an artist. Like you're an artist because you made dinner or breakfast. And so to me, I really want to break down the barriers around that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And what comes to mind for me is when I was younger, I went to a performing arts school. So I did a lot of formal dance classes, like tap dance and jazz and like all these things. And I did okay. You know, I could follow instructions, but it wasn't really moving me. And I didn't feel like I was able to express. But now, as an adult, even like last week, and I was out all night long just ecstatic dancing on the beach, you know, to drums and ancient music, and I'll do it in my living room. I'll do it anywhere. And ecstatic dance, it's just that's my uh, tool for creativity. I can kind of connect to myself and my body, and even though I know technique in tap dance and all the other dance techniques and all the things, it's the messy, right? The impulsive, like the body just kind of doing what it wants without the brain following a guideline. So I just wanted to insert that in case that helps anyone else think of what ways you like to be creative that might be outside of the box, coloring outside of the lines, something other than what you've been taught, like in formal creativity classes or education.
Yeah, it's really about following what you're talking about is following your intuition, which is really your internal wisdom. And and that is where your power is. It's already inside of you. And so it's following that sort of gut instinct, and ignoring what the mind says about it. It's where your power is.
Yes, yes. So with that, if our power is within our internal wisdom, can creativity access trauma or challenges in ways that talk therapy sometimes can't reach?
That's one of my favorite questions. And I'm a huge proponent of therapy and support and all of that. And there are places where trauma exists and gets stuck in our body. It's all energy. We're all energy. And talking keeps us in our head. And so, this, especially for trauma, is extremely powerful because it reaches that place inside of us that I don't even think we have words for. And it allows us to witness ourselves, which is just another layer of empowerment where you don't need another person to really see and understand our own lived experience. Because the lived experience is tucked behind, whatever rib you want to you envision it, right? So when we go internal and we can kind of imagine the places where trauma still lives in our body and kind of jacks us up or over, it comes out sideways. And until we really reach those places and allow that trauma to be met in the same way it was created, which again is beyond words. And because how do you put into words some of our lived experiences? And especially when we're experiencing them, we're just trying to survive. There aren't words for it. And so when we engage with those experiences and give them the room they need to express themselves, we're doing ourselves an enormous favor of moving that energy. It allows our capacity to expand, and it's a game changer, really, in terms of trauma that because I work with people with some of the deepest, most complex trauma, certainly my own complex trauma, my children's complex trauma, and because of that, I feel very comfortable sitting in rooms and spaces, knowing that words can't touch it, but knowing that there's capacity to soothe and give space for what needs to come to the surface because it all wants to come to the surface.
What are your thoughts on creativity, expression, everything that we're discussing today, in conjunction or in parallel with nervous system regulation?
Well, the cool thing about this, or soul portraits in general, like when you're ripping up materials, you are regulating your nervous system. It is a somatic experience, and you're also following when people are give themselves permission to stop curating themselves, amazing things happen. And there's just this like flood of hope, relief, possibility that they didn't know was possible. And when people have a lived experience of that, there's this empowerment like, oh, I can meet myself. I don't need a pill. I don't need another person. Like, I just did this thing and it was so simple. We have this tendency to overcomplicate. And so, nervous system regulation, when we meet ourselves just by revisiting and then ripping up a photo that we were afraid to rip up, and people have precious things. And if they have a beloved anything, I don't want them to rip it up if that's going to create more stress. So I'm always like, make a photocopy. And if you don't have materials, especially in this day and age, like you can recreate materials that are almost exactly what you remember. And so energetically speaking, if it lands in your body as true and accurate, that's it. It covers it. It doesn't have to be the exact piece of material.
What about when someone is like resistant to this process? Maybe they haven't tried it before, maybe it sounds silly, maybe they're just such a logical person. They're
Mhm.
used to the talk therapy. They're used
Sure.
to like doing things by the book.
Yeah.
How do you help someone navigate, or how do you, just kind of work with them in a sense?
So there is an inherent amount of resistance to this process because it's essentially looking under the hood, right? So it asks you to peek inside. If you're not ready, you just won't do it. There is no amount of convincing that I'm ever interested in doing for anyone. Like, I'm not interested in trying to convince people to do this. However, the people who, like the lawyers and the doctors and the logical people who come to this process with a lot of skepticism, when they do, usually what's happening is that everything looks good on paper, but they're miserable inside. And they've done all of the self-help and they've gone into therapy and they're doing the meditation practice and they've changed their diet and they've done everything and they still feel empty inside. And I'm like, that's when they come to me, is when everything else hasn't worked and they're willing to think outside the box and try something else. And so I haven't seen anybody else doing what I do. Art therapy is similar, right? Because it marries therapists and creativity, but it analyzes what you're making in the session, where I'm asking people to revisit themselves, their history, how they became who they are. And that is where the gold is, because that's where we just got distorted away from ourselves. So it's how we can recover who we really are when we engage with our own materials, our own history. Um, the experiences that have stayed with us are the ones that shaped us for better or for worse. And I'm asking people to revisit that. And when they do, there is a very quick and deep understanding that there's so much more to them than they thought. So resistance is a part of the process, and I welcome it because to me, resistance is a portal. And when you allow that to be there and accept resistance, acceptance is like magic, like acceptance. It's not complicated, but we really, really don't engage with it. And I'm asking people to accept every part of themselves because that is where freedom is. We are complex, complicated people. And when we curate who we are and exile parts of ourselves, we become fractured and we can't have authentic relationships. And we won't trust love in our life if we're only showing them another person the parts that we think are lovable. And I'm saying, accept yourself as is, ugly and beauty together, so that you can trust the relationships in your life, so that you can show up for yourself, your kids, your friends, your pets, your plants, whatever, right? Like, I really want people to know that their entire being is beautiful, even if it's not comfortable. Like we're confusing comfort with what's right and wrong. And it's not comfortable, but that's where your power is. When you accept what's uncomfortable, you're free.
In the conscious community, we use the term shadow work a lot.
Yeah.
And in your process, it feels like there's a lot of shadow work embedded in there without overly focusing on shadow work. It's kind of like this all it's kind of like it can go anywhere.
Yeah.
Shadows could come up, but it doesn't have to stay on the shadow. It can go anywhere. It can encompass anything. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful process. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today for this conversation. What is one small creative practice that listeners can try this week just for the purposes of maybe moving through grief or moving through just a fear, like a difficult emotion that they might be dealing with? How can they use creativity to navigate through that? I guess, if someone asked me that question, I would say try some ecstatic dance. But since this is your wheelhouse, what do you think is one small creative practice listeners can try?
Well, again, I really want listeners to start trusting their own intuitive creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever their creative language is, follow that. So, for me, it was doodling in the margins while I'm on hold with insurance or whatever.
Okay.
Um, so it's mindless creativity. I want people to access
Mindless.
mindless, that's joyful, that's playful. So is it playing with their kids' Legos? Is it making coffee? Is it doodling in the margins? Like whatever that thing is where you lose track of time. Maybe it's pickleball, maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's laying in the grass and like closing your eyes to the sun. Like whatever that is, maybe it's dance. So, following that intuitive creative play is a way to start bringing our awareness into the wisdom of our body. And
Okay.
and that's it, right? Like start noticing all the creativity that you're already doing because
Okay.
we're doing it all day long.
Yeah. And so a deeper layer for this same question. So if there's a lawyer, doctor, they're working, I don't know, 60, 70 hours a week. They haven't been doing their runs. They haven't been mowing the lawn or helping the kids with the Legos. They have no clue, right? Could they remember from childhood? Like what's a tip for them?
Well, so yeah, to think back on the creative play that you did in childhood is typically what you still would love to do. So if you made tree houses, then start collecting twigs and make a house out of them. Or if your kids have a bunch of popsicle sticks, make a little fort out of that. Like make a tent or a blanket fort in the living room and crawl in with your favorite music, right? Whatever, but it is saying, even in our busiest lives, this is a source of well-being that is so incredibly powerful, and it requires us to pivot where we put our attention. So I would rather make a fort in the living room than vacuum the carpet. So it is, or maybe do both, right? Because you're going to be on the carpet. But like making yourself and your creative language a priority, think back to what you enjoyed as a child and expand on how you could possibly bring that back into your life now.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your wisdom. Do you have any last thoughts or any pieces of wisdom that you want to leave us with?
I believe that creativity is a portal to possibility, and that I just encourage everyone to reconnect with that part of themselves.
Amazing, amazing. So if this conversation really resonated with your soul, please reach out. Her website is here in the description, in the description box, and I'll read it out loud really quickly. It's soulportrait.art. And as soon as I scroll down to the middle of the page, there is something so beautiful here that just activated something within me. So I don't know what it is. Is this can't be a soul portrait. It's like yellow. It's in the middle of your website.
It probably is a soul portrait. Behind me is a soul portrait. They're everywhere.
Okay. Yeah, this is beautiful. This just activated me in something. Like I'm definitely going to do something creative tonight before I go to bed. So thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. You guys, again, if you really enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, download it, share it with your friends, and also do me a favor. Think of one person, just one person in your life that really needs to hear this conversation. Like this conversation, I believe is medicine. It can open up so many doors for that one person who really needs it. And you might have already thought about them as you were listening. So just copy and paste this link, send them a nice little note in the text. I thought about you. Check out this episode. You might like it. And that will help us get the word out about the show. Thank you, everyone. Namaste and have a great day.